Hello, everyone. We're going to start this wonderful panel. If you can all take your seat. So we have a very exciting panel for you today. It's a dark and stormy night, setting the scene and building suspense. So I feel like we're in the right place for that, considering it's the Edgars. And I want to introduce all of our wonderful nominees. Okay, we have over to my right, Deitch, who is nominated for Best First Novel, Killer Potential, from HarperCollins' William Morrow. Next to her, we have Erin Soderberg Downing, who's the Best Juvenile nominee for What Happened Then from Scholastic Press. We have Sulari Gentill, the Mary Higgins Clark nominee for Five Found Dead from Sourcebook's Poison Pens. Next to that, we have Phillippi Ryan, who's a Mary Higgins Clark nominee for All This Could Be Yours from Minotaur Books. We have Trisha Sakhlecha next to her, the Best Novel nominee for The Inheritance from Penguin Random House, and also Lisa Unger, who's nominated for Best Short Story nominee for The Kill Clause from Amazon Original Stories. So let's jump right into it. First question I thought was, can you all tell us one great suspense scene in each of your books that really would kind of encapsulate what your book was, and that you're especially proud of writing? So my way I do it, we don't have to go down the line. Anybody can jump out if they want to talk about a great scene from one of their books. So who would like to start?
Well,
Go for it, Lisa.
I'm going to start, only because I don't think I could pick a scene from my story and say how great it was. Like,
But it was great, so go with it. Yeah, it's known knowledge that all of them are great because you've all been nominated. Yes.
I think that, for me, like, suspense generates from character, right? Mm-hmm. So the character always comes first for me, and so, Paige, who is like kind of at the heart of the story, I think that the most interesting moment for me in the story was when she sort of connected with Apple, mm-hmm. who is the child of the person she has arrived at a home to extinguish, mm-hmm, exterminate. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment when she connects with this child, it kind of brings her back to her own childhood trauma. And so for me, those are the most interesting moments, when characters intersect and we learn about each of them through the experiences of the other. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that suspense is generated there in mm-hmm. In the action of character and the conflict of character. So those are the things that really fascinate me and interest me as a writer.
Cool, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else want to add? Hank, yeah.
Well, if we tell you what the best scene is, then it would give it away.
Right, but also it's a good plug for the book.
It is a good plug for the book. All of you have read all of these books anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We know you have. One of the things that I love to do, and I remember that scene because that moment was pivotal in your short story, when she meets Apple and she realizes that it's a real person, mm-hmm. and her whole concept of how she's going to handle that changes. So that's a real domino moment, which was quite lovely, I thought. One of the things I try to do is to make each scene be more than part of the story, mm-hmm. but to be sort of an iceberg in the book, so that you see the action on the top level, but underneath, just as Lisa's saying, underneath, something more is happening. So there's a scene in All This Could Be Yours, which is, as you know, about an author on the book tour from hell, where I weaponized everything about book tour and made it terrifying.
In some way, yes.
And there's a moment where, and also because it's a thriller, there has to be a ticking clock in it. So and there also, because she's on book tour, everything is unfamiliar and everybody is a stranger. So there's a moment when a person who is purporting to be a book tour guide comes to pick her up at the airport and takes her out on the highway, a circular highway around Des Moines, where she is and where she has no idea where she is. And the person who turns out to be bad, I'm being careful here, the person who turns out to be bad says, you'll see that this highway is a circle around Des Moines. If you imagine a clock, we're at 6. When we come back to 6, your life will be different depending on what decision you make. So now there's setting, because the character can look out the window and see the other cars, no one of whom can help her. She's trapped in the back seat. She has a phone, but what good is that going to do? And she has to negotiate with this bad person during the time it takes to get around the circle. And the bad guy says, we're at 6, we're at 9, we're at 12. were at 3. And so I was very proud of myself
Yeah,
for
as you
building in the suspense by the setting. And that scene worked out very nicely for me.
And a dual setting in a sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is great. Yes, Erin, did you want to add? Yeah.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about like the craft of how I built the scene that I'm the most proud of. So both Trisha and I have books that are set on an island, and I write middle grade. And something terrible happened in this family many years ago. And I tend to write more lighthearted novels. And I knew I had to show this bad thing where a child actually dies on this island. And I had started writing this book while I was living on the island that was the setting of the novel. And that helped me really sort of like build the scene and the setting for it. And when I went to write that scene, I checked myself into a lonely motel away from my children and their happy faces, even though they're teenagers, and my dog, and I really isolated myself so that I could like feel the loneliness and despair of this character before they died. And sorry, I ruined it for all of you, but you know that she died. And so that's the scene I was most proud of because I really like sank into this sort of sadness and heaviness, which is hard for me as a middle grade writer. You know, middle grade tends to be a little more lighthearted. So that's probably the proudest I've ever been as an author. And that's what I loved reading Trisha's book for, is we have a very similar setting. You're stuck in this island and you can't get out, you can't escape. So I love that.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Erin, what I've realized just now is that I also went and stayed on the island that eventually became the inspiration for the island in The Inheritance. But also going back to what you were saying earlier about this being an island that you're stuck on and can't get out of, that's very much the setting in my novel, The Inheritance. But if I were to talk about a specific scene, there's a moment where the storm cuts the island off completely. So they're already isolated, but now they don't have any power, any way to reach out to anyone. And the protagonist, Myra, at this point comes face to face with another character with whom she has a really, really troubled history. Someone that she's several times considered doing actual harm to. And what ends up happening is that's when you kind of see the setting and the character interact with each other. Because not only is she realizing that this beautiful island that has been her perfect haven for so long is actually turning into something quite threatening, she's forced to confront an aspect of her own personality that terrifies her. So the suspense is really coming from her own realization of what she's capable of when she's confronted by this person. And I felt quite proud having written that, because I felt like this is one scene where there's next to no dialogue, and everything is happening purely via the interaction between character and setting and internal conflict.
Yes, Sulari.
I wrote a train book, and I'm the world's most irresponsible writer. I just sit down and I write. And I don't really think that much before I start writing. So I thought, oh, yes, I'll write a riff on Murder on the Orient Express and just start writing, doody-doody-doo. And then I realized that a train novel is a nightmare. Because not only is it a closed set, but the rooms are in sequence. So you have to almost map out where people are. Otherwise, people are walking past the killer as he's killing someone. So I was actually, which is actually quite against my process, that whole very sensible mapping things out. So I was quite proud of myself that I managed to do it and made the decision never to write another train book. But
One and done.
Yeah, but when you talk about scenes of suspense, the difference between when Agatha Christie wrote the Orient Express, or Murder on the Orient Express, is that she could isolate the train with an avalanche. That's not really possible to do it for that long these days. So I had to come up with a way of creating that isolation so the suspense would work on the novel without it being twee or unrealistic, and linking it to the modern age. So if I'm proud of anything, it's the lightning bolt idea of using COVID to, or a new strain of COVID to actually isolate the train.
How did you want to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, so my book, I kind of relate to your train novel problem. I have a road novel with killer potential, and so it's funny to think about it in terms of setting, because it's like 100 settings, like they're just constantly on the move. So I think honestly the like kind of set piece that I'm the most proud of is I wanted to stage like a home invasion, because they kind of needed to get off the road at some point. It's really boring. As my editor told me, if they're just in hotels and cars over and over again. So I was like, okay, we'll do a home invasion. And I had to think about where would be the most interesting place to put them and how it would obviously propel the story forward. And I picked this really kind of like dirty Florida Panhandle town that was like 30 minutes away from where my mom lived, and I drove there and like recorded voice notes while I drove, like a spy, so I'd remember all the little observations that I wanted. It was such a like a rich setting, and yeah, I don't want to say too much more about it, but there's boats involved and some very drunk teenagers, and yeah, I had a lot of fun with that sequence.
Nice. So when you all start a new thriller or a mystery, what usually comes first for you? The setting, the crime, or the twist, and why?
Should I start?
Sure, yeah.
For me, everything begins and ends with character voice. So for me, it's usually like I'm kind of an information junkie, so I get these obsessions, and I find myself like kind of in a swath of research. I kind of think of my life as a continuum. It's like reading, writing, researching, living, repeat, and that's kind of how it works. So I'm usually like deep into an obsession with some topic, and then it might collide with something else that I'm interested in, or another, like a story or an experience while I'm on the road or something like that. And then if I hear a character voice, then I know that we're going to be writing something, whether it's a novel or a short story. But I have to have that voice in my head. And then when I sit down with that voice, I follow that voice or voices, depending on what I'm writing, through the narrative. And it unfolds for me much in the way it will for my reader later. Like I write for the same reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen to the people who are living in my head. And so everything comes from that. And so everything from setting to story flows from that character, because where you choose to live and how you choose to act and what's happening to you in your life, that flows authentically from who you are. So it's not like there's an outline or a plot or a story first, and then I plug my characters into that story and move them around the page. And I mean, everything is as important as everything else. But for me, it all begins with character, because every piece of action or suspense or tension or conflict will flow from that person or those people for me on the page.
I think for me, it's quite similar actually to what Lisa said. It starts with character, but I'm also a very visual person. So for me, it's usually an image. So with this book, I had this image of the protagonist running through the woods covered in blood. And I knew that I wanted to write about a very, very close-knit family with 3 adult siblings. So I knew that something had happened in this family, and then it becomes a case of examining that image from every angle, turning it over again and again until I know, why is this person covered in blood? Why are they running through the woods? Why are they feeling such deep guilt? What's happened in their past to lead them to this moment, and what is it that they're going to do to get out of that predicament? That's, for me, the point where the story is born. The setting, the twist, the narrative engine, all of that comes later in trying to answer all of these questions. But something that I will say about the twist is, writing murder mysteries or psychological thrillers, I do kind of need to know who's the person who's going to end up dead by the end of the novel, but I very rarely know the twist until I've written it, and that almost always changes towards the end.
Is that so it almost keeps fresh for you? Like, you not knowing the twist ultimately amplifies the twist?
I feel like I start off with knowing the twist, but then by the time I've gotten to the end, I'm so bored of that twist that I need to give it another twist.
It's like the red herring twist for you. Interesting.
I love the idea.
Erin.
I love the idea of the image. And now I'm going to do that because I love to have like a mood board or something up, but like having that key central image to look at and really bring you back into it. I consider my setting always a character in my stories, and so it generally is the setting that comes before anything else. Recently, I've written 75 books, and you can do that when you write kids' books because we write series, and there's 10 of them.
75?
75.
Oh my
it's
God.
a lot.
Wow.
So I'm not going to say that there's like an answer of what I do every time. But I don't.
Actually, 120.
Yeah, no, it's wild how you can write series and they come out quickly. But like I work with kids mostly, and I talk about how there's a no right or wrong way to go about it. Sometimes the character comes to you first, and that's fine. Build everything else up around it. If you're somebody who sees the setting, that's fine. Work with that. And so that's what I do. Is now what I do is what you do, and I'm going to print out an image, and that's it. Whether it's a person, an event, and something, but it does tend to be that the setting is as important as any of the characters in my story.
And I think that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hardest part for me is coming up with that one cool gem of an idea that's going to be the domino that falls over, that pushes everything, all the other dominoes over into place. And I think, and all I need is one good idea a year, and I say to the universe, I just need one good idea, and you never know when that'll come. So sometimes it comes from a voice, sometimes it comes from a place, but most often I think for me it comes from an occurrence. For All This Could Be Yours, I was signing at Poison. I was on book tour. Well, I was signing at Poison Pen Bookstore. And I inscribed somebody's book, So Wonderful to See You in Scottsdale, and I put the date, Dear Sally, wonderful to see you in Scottsdale, put the date, signed my name, and as I handed it to her, I thought, well, I've just given her an alibi. Because, right, who, what, when, where, she could prove she was with me. So then I thought, that's funny. And then I thought of all the other things that we all write in books. Thank you so much for everything. What does that really mean? So wonderful to see you again. Really? What happened? Why is it so wonderful? And really only best wishes is the only thing that's safe to write in a book. And I started thinking about how we as authors are, and this is what the domino was, we as authors on book tour are constantly in a room where everybody in the audience knows more about us than we know about them. And what if, right? And you don't, and sorry, but start thinking about that. And we say, I'm going to be in New York at this place at this time, please come see me. And we're hoping that you're all good. And what if you're not? And that was the beginning of that. So then I had to think, who would be in that situation? An author. And she'd have to be a debut author who didn't know anything about this and had no experience. Right. And then you can just feel, it's like if you drop a pebble into a pond, and some pebbles just float, just sink to the bottom with no ripples. And some, when you put the pebble in the pond, the ripples just spread out, and you can see the fullness of a novel almost instantly, even if you don't know what it is. And that's what I'm really looking for.
For me, setting, plot, and character are all kind of gears in the same machine. They all influence and drive one another. So I can't really say which one is primary. For this novel, I had taken a trip on the Orient Express, and I had no notion of ever writing a book on that train because it had been done. With this... I was just there to be a holiday maker. But it did occur to me when I was on that train that nobody had actually ever died on the Orient Express. And yet everybody who gets on the train is thinking about murder. And so I just started to think about how stories affect the lens through which we regard the world. And then, of course, the character is this who lends himself to that situation is, of course, a writer. So they got to get on the train and they view it as a writer. So then again, the setting is changed by the character and how they view it. And then the plot becomes determined by the character and how they would behave on the train in the situation. So it all just sort of tends to fall in and fold and weave into one another, so that I have a really hard time saying which is the primary.
It's interesting, you're right, because the fiction is greater than the reality when it comes to the Orient Express. It's the first things our mind go to, rather than the actual train itself.
And there's so much in life that we regard through the lens of what we have experienced in literature and in television shows. And, even coming to New York, I'm experiencing it as someone who grew up in another country and looked to the Big Apple as this almost mythological city. So, and that changes, and even character changes depending on setting. In Australia, I'm an immigrant who lives in the country. In America, I'm an Australian. So everything changes.
Hannah, did you want to add to that? Yeah.
I feel like my answer is very similar to yours. Like, I think as writers, we have a lot of ideas and a lot of characters might be kind of floating around, a lot of interesting settings. But I think in order for the book to go, in order for me to sit down and be like, I'm actually ready to write something, I kind of need all of the elements to be in place. I need the character, the setting, the crime, and usually also the twist. And it kind of, when it comes as like one continuous thought, which very weirdly was kind of what happened with this book, that's what gets me excited to actually start writing. And I usually just will go like immediately. The idea through, and all the other things that are kind of, if it's a character that's still kind of like existing in my head, or a setting, like it doesn't feel like it's ready to go yet.
Right,
I feel like I need those other pieces to like come into the picture.
Okay, let's talk about how fast kind of suspense and thrillers move. How do you balance atmosphere with pacing so that the story never slows down? You want kind of those moments that are slow. How do you build that with the fast moments to keep the kind of story going as much as possible?
Am I starting?
Anybody, yeah, go for it, Lisa.
Okay.
Go for it, yeah.
I guess we have to go, we're authors, we have to go in order. Like, that's our thing,
yeah,
right?
It's okay. But we bounced around a little bit. We did
a little bouncing. Yeah, I mean, I think that all of these things, like, there's all these different elements, and like with a short story, especially with a short story thriller, especially, everything has to kind of balance and work off each other. But again, it starts from character, and the character voice is where, for me, where all the suspense lives, and also the pacing, because it's the choices of this character and how they're moving through space and time that I think generate the most suspense. Like, not for me as a writer, and also hopefully for my readers. So I think there's I think a lot of it, that first draft is like such especially for a short story, it's such an intense rush. It's almost like, I think about my novels as like, I know my husband's here, hi honey. I think of my novels as like a marriage. It's a long relationship. There's good days, there's bad days. You're with your book for a very long time. And I sometimes think of my short stories as like, not that I would know, but like a weekend fling.
Like a fling. I love that analysis.
Right?
Yes.
It might just muscle its way in, from nowhere. Like I might just, it's like I'll be writing my book, and then, especially in the case of The Kill Clause, because I had started getting into, the whole Christmas vibe, right? Just because I like to take a shiny thing, something that we all think is so pretty and sweet, and then just smash it open to see what's inside. So that's how I kind of started writing Christmas thrillers. But I think that you have to balance the character development and the story and the pacing and the setting and all of it, and it all has to kind of effortlessly mesh. Otherwise, you can't have that big suspense piece unless you're reader cares about your
Sure.
character.
Right.
Right, because you could have a very pacey plot and it could move very fast, but if nobody's interested in what's happening to your individual characters, then it's, I think it can fall flat. Even if there's a great twist, if nobody cared in the first place and everybody cares,
care about the outcome.
suspense is
Yeah.
generated by like, oh my God, what is going to happen to this person? And curiosity of character, and then just, the ticking clock and, the impending doom of a thriller or whatever the outside forces that we're working against. But like, I don't think it's, everything has to kind of move together. It's not, for me, there's not a lot of intellectual choices that are being made, especially in that first draft, because it's so, organic and it flows from that character voice. And I, a lot of times, feel like I'm following that character voice through that story in the same way. So it's hard to say, like, where do you like, go, okay, here's character development in this, these 10 sentences, and then here's, something's got to happen. But I think, Hank and I have talked about this a lot, like, so that first draft is really like, that's mine. That's all me.
Yeah.
It comes out.
vomit,
It comes
yeah.
out in a rush. It's everything. I wouldn't say it's vomit, but it's mine. It's all me. And then there's another stage where it's the editorial stage, and not even this is even before your editor gets it. It's like where you go through that story or that novel and say, does this scene advance plot or character? Hopefully both. So those are the choices that I make in editorial. They're not necessarily the choices that I make in the the rush of writing, especially short fiction.
You,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you hit on something important in saying first draft, right? Like, I think that the understanding the importance and essentialness of that revision for yourself is really the only way to get the pacing down right. Like, I write most of my first drafts very quickly. They're just like a vomit of plot, right? And then you go back, and and because otherwise my books would just be people sitting around talking, and no one wants to read that either. And so I've learned to sort of like express the story, and then you go back and you layer in those parts. And it's taken me a long time to sort of understand the value of that revision, both from myself and then accepting the criticism and the comments from others. Like, until you let that like preciousness of your work go and like learn to appreciate the value of revision, that pacing's just never going to be right. So that's my thought on it.
I do like the way I never thought of it that way, but writing is so much for other people. It's for your editor, your agent, then ultimately the audience. And to have that first draft that's actually for you, I mean, it puts a more positive spin on it than thinking of it more as like a purge and taking ownership of it.
It's a magical space when you write that first draft. At least it is for me.
Yeah.
It belongs to me.
Yes.
To me. I'm the only person that's been with those characters, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm not writing just for myself. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a fantasy of what the writer is. Oh, I write in a room for myself. I do, sure, but then my book is also published.
And then it's out of your hands.
And then it's out of my hands.
And that first draft, it's great because you know all those details.
do.
They're in your
Sure,
heart.
yeah.
And
They
so
might
it's
not be
fine
on
that
the
they're not
page,
there, but
right.
then they have to come out.
And you need
Like,
them
and
to
share
get
them.
to
Yeah.
that second draft and third draft and
Yeah.
fourth draft. But I like that. I never thought of it that way, but I'm gonna spin it.
I
Yeah.
always feel like, when I turn that book into my editor, it's literally the pinnacle of my ability. It's the best book that I could have written. It's not the best book, it's the best book that I can write.
Sure.
And then after the editorial, my editorial and the, my conversation with my editor, from that point we take it to the best that it can be. And that's a really nice thing too.
Yeah. Is anyone to add to that?
Look,
Sulari, yeah.
I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons. I tend to be a one draft writer.
Wow.
I probably don't write as fast as you. I write about 1,000 words a day until it's finished. So,
That's a good amount a day.
but I don't go on until that 1,000 words. I mean, I write 1,000 precise words. I think the reason is I used to be a lawyer, and the one thing that the legal profession teaches you is to choose your words precisely in the first place. So I never put down nearly what I mean. I put down exactly what I mean. So there isn't a huge amount of change. I'm also a complete pantser. I don't plot at all. So I find that pace is maintained simply because I'm writing to find out what's going on. But you know, it's true what everybody's been saying about you do need the light and dark moments and the slow and the fast moments. And the way I think of it is in terms of framing. So if you had a really ornate picture that had a lot of detail in it, you'd frame it with a simple frame. And if you had a really simple picture, then you could frame it with an ornate frame, and it would grab people's attention. So when I have a piece of writing that I want the reader to pay attention to, I want to jolt them, if the scene is quiet, I frame it with action. And if there's a lot of action going through in the book, and I want the reader to understand something particular, it will appear in a quiet conversation in the middle of Bedlam. Similarly, the other way around, if I want to emphasize the action, then I will frame it by a quieter scene, and make people jump that way. It's the way. So if you consider, if I was to tell you a story that I walked out the door and there's bombings going on, and I'm trying to avoid the bullets, and I weave through tanks, and I dive across the road, and someone comes out from behind a tree and shoots me. That has less impact than if I'm sitting by the side of a lake having a picnic with my with the love of my life, and we're having high tea and sandwiches, and I'm pouring tea, and someone comes out from behind a tree and kills me and shoots me. The second has more impact because it's framed by something that's quieter. A lot of what we do is we deal in the unexpected.
I think you're talking about being trained as a lawyer. I'm trained as a reporter. And as a reporter, I'm constantly in search of the story. And that's what I'm doing as I'm writing my novels, too. I have an idea at the beginning, and I go out in search of the story, and I have no idea what the end of the story is, just like life. I don't know who's dying, and I don't know who did it, and I don't know the twist. I just know that something terrible has happened to someone I care about. And I think of the pacing as like in a fairy tale, when the character is following the gold coins through the woods, and how far will they go? Because they know there's a gold coin coming, and they'll follow my story to pick up the next gold coin, and then they think, oh, there's another gold coin in the forest, I'm going to go through that story. And that progress through the forest, picking up information and gold coins along the way, the pathway is lined with decisions, and every decision a character makes, every twist they take, every turn they take, every decision they make advances the story. But the reader, that's in the author's head. In the reader's head, they know a cool thing is coming, and they're invested in the story so much that they'll keep going to get that next gold coin. I have no idea as an author what's going to happen next in the story, and that's what gets me to the computer every day, is that I can't wait to find out what happens next. And the only way I can find out is by writing that. And that's really the exciting part of the story for me. I do have to say that when it comes to pacing, my books start out, my first drafts are usually 120,000 words. And I know that they'll be cut, and I'm delighted to have them cut to 90,000 words. And that's what keeps me going through as well, because I think, I don't care, I'm just gonna write this is all gonna go, it's all gonna go. But when I take out what's not the story, and the pieces that remain click together, that's when I know it's worked.
Do you feel like it takes the pressure off to have such a large
Sure,
manuscript?
absolutely, because some days, on the bad writing days, I'll be typing and I'll think, this is the worst thing that anybody has ever written in the history of the planet. This is the worst sentence. And then I think, yep, just go write another bad sentence and another bad sentence, because you can fix it later.
Yeah.
in the draft that's meant for poetry, in the draft that's meant for passion, in the draft that's meant for tension, in the draft that's meant for suspense. But this first draft is the draft where I am writing it to find out what happens, and I'm going to make it cool later.
I think my process is probably exactly the opposite, because my first drafts tend to be extremely short. And when I'm doing a first draft, I'm almost approaching every single scene. I'm doing it very intuitively. I don't think I've ever sat down and thought about what exactly is this scene supposed to do, or what exactly is this character supposed to feel or think, or what do I want the reader to experience as I'm writing the first draft. All of that comes in the edit. But something that helps me as I write my books is I like to think of each scene as a held breath. How long can I force the character to hold their breath while I get through this particular sequence of events? And so quite often what will end up happening is that I've written a series of chapters that perhaps feel a little too short at first draft stage, and you kind of go through the story at incredible pace. And then I'm going back in and adding the atmosphere and bringing in the layering to slow things down where I feel that's needed. But to approach each scene almost as if I've got to speed through it because it's a held breath helps me maintain that sense of momentum in a very different way to allowing myself to write the scene in perhaps a more lyrical, with more lyrical prose, if that makes sense.
It's wonderful that we can do it so differently. It's wonderful. I love that.
But I think that's the beauty. It's like all these books get made, and I think the reader almost expects that they're all written the same, and it couldn't be more different in terms of like how you get there. Hannah, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my philosophy about this is pretty simple, which is the way I've been trying to think about it is that monotony is not slowness, it's just sameness. So even a thrilling scene over and over again is boring because you're just experiencing like the same kind of emotional pressure over and over again. And so I think you just like, I think naturally kind of get a sense of what those kind of peaks and valleys are. And a thing I do try to do is if I know I am kind of gearing up towards a really like climactic feeling scene, I try to do it all in one day, just have like one long, like 5,000 word day.
So you're just in it.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of staying in it, and you cannot do that every day. So that's like, that just happens like maybe once a week, and that'd be a lot. But yeah, I think it does just kind of help you naturally stay in like present in the scene as you're writing it.
I think that's also true for prose. Beautiful sentences all the time can get monotonous.
Yeah.
I once had a student, I taught a class, and gee, she wrote a beautiful sentence, but she just wrote beautiful sentence after beautiful sentence after beautiful sentence. And you read it, and you could appreciate that they were beautifully put together, but you had no idea what was going on because it distracted you, because there was no framing and there was no moment to pause as a reader and appreciate.
So we're about at the 10-minute mark. We're going to open it up to questions. If any of you had some amazing questions for all these authors, now is the time.
Oh, don't be shy.
Everybody has a question. Come on.
Okay, where?
I'm going to call on people. Okay, all the way in the back. Thank you so much. Yes. I was about to call on people. No. Yes, in the back, yeah.
I wonder thank you for this wonderful conversation. And I wonder if someone might want to talk about the importance of concrete detail, the smell, taste, touch, that sort of thing, in constructing setting.
So using like the 5 senses to construct detail?
I think that's such a brilliant question because that is make or break. That is make or break in a scene to me, and it is such a powerful weapon for authors. Sometimes just one word can tell you socioeconomic status. It can tell you geography. It can tell you exactly, mental health, everything. Does somebody have a Mies van der Rohe coffee table, or is their coffee table 2 apple crates with a shelf on the top of them? Every single, and sometimes it's just one word that can bring a scene to life. So I think about that. And I remember this so specifically when I was writing my very first novel, that I had someone have a couch. That, she sat on the couch. And then I thought, no, it's a red couch. And then I saw that in my head, the couch turned red in my head. And then I thought, that's so interesting. It's a red leather couch. And then the couch turned into red leather in my head. And I remember this so specifically. And I have tried to harness that exact thing because when you choose a gorgeous specific detail, the movie in the reader's mind starts to unspool, and it will fill in the rest of the setting based on the domino of that one detail.
And also, there's this contract, right, between the reader and the writer and the reader. Like, so, Hank imagines this red couch, this red, or red leather couch, and, she sees it in her mind, and maybe it's like a sectional, and then somebody else reads it, and maybe they see like a divan, like that's like the most beautiful, I think, part of being a writer is that when you write a book, it belongs to you, and then when you read a book, that same book belongs to you, and you bring yourself to it. But like as writers, we have to employ our 5 senses if we want to create scene that is, that ignites that spark of imagination in our reader. We have to employ our senses so that you can kind of employ yours in the reading. And I'll also say too, for thriller writers, I think it's really important to have a knowledge of biology and how the body works and how the body responds to fear and how the body responds when you're lying or when you feel somebody is lying to you. So there's this amazing book called What Every Body Is Saying, and it talks about like sort of some of the limbic responses of the brain and how people's bodies respond to fear and anger and how they telegraph that. So I think having that knowledge of the human body and how it works is another place as a thriller writer where you can really employ your senses and tell so much about character, just by what you're showing rather than what you're saying about who the person is.
I love what everybody is saying.
What everybody is saying. I think the author is Joe Navarro.
Okay.
He's I think a former FBI interrogator. And so it's just a really interesting, it's a really interesting book. I think every thriller writer should read it.
It also allows you those details. Those details also allow you to tuck in backstory that's not backstory. So if the person steps into the ocean and smells those saltwater air and they quake in fear because they remember the last time they were in the ocean and the domino falls and you understand what happened to them in the past that's causing their action in the present. Instead of going back and telling the story about how someone almost drowned in the ocean, their response to that scent of briny air and that feel of the foam around their ankles becomes a completely different sensation for them than it does for the person standing next to them who loves being in the water.
I think there's just like the pace and everything else, it's something that should be used in a considered and sparing way. So one amazing detail that brings the writer straight into the scene is great. 10 details pushes them out.
Yes.
So I think that's the balance. What we're doing as writers, I think, is sketching. We've got to allow the reader to colour in the picture so that they're engaged in the scene, and we get them to engage their imaginations and come into our stories.
So I think we might have time for one more question if somebody had a burning question. Yes, the fellow right there.
You've talked about story, setting, and character, and I'm kind of curious about how intertwined they get with you, where if you get into a story and then you realize the character is not working, or you find the setting isn't right, or that the story isn't right, will you drop something else in? Will you scrap the whole thing? Do you like, I'm curious how soon and how tightly they get bound together.
So how to fix when you're kind of stuck?
Well, when you find something's not working,
Okay.
do you throw it out, or do you drop in another character, or do you find that it's all too tight and you can't go forward with it?
Okay, so how do we fix when something's not working?
I think, going back to what you said earlier about how intertwined are they, for me, it's completely inextricable. I think setting, character, and story are all aspects of the same coin, all facets of the same coin. Something that I specifically like to think about, particularly when it comes to setting, we talk a lot about the psychology of characters. I also like to think about the psychology and the history of a setting. And that often becomes the starting point for me. So what has that particular landscape lived through? What's the specific history that makes it evocative for this particular story? Is there trauma in the character's past that I can mirror within the landscape or within the setting in some way or form? I think those little details help make it tie it closer together. It helps make it feel more coherent as a story, and it also makes my job a little bit easier as a writer, because I can talk about setting but immediately have the reader associate that with what's going on in the character's mind. I can have the character take a particular action, but rather than them thinking about the results of the consequences of that action, I can have the setting reflect that back to them. So if one doesn't work, the entire thing for me falls apart. And quite often it's then a case of going back right to the storyboard and saying, okay, what do I need to fix, and how can I think about all of the different details of each of these elements, and how can I try to bring them back together?
Yeah, I personally can't start a story until all of those things are really set for me. And like really, I need to have each of those pieces in place. And then I am not a pantser. I am a full-blown plotter, because as I told you, otherwise my books are about characters just talking to each other. And so the only problems I tend to encounter by the time I've started writing, because oftentimes I've been plotting and thinking about and building these characters in this world up in my mind for so long, for years oftentimes, that then the biggest problems I have are with the plot. And when I talk to kids, I talk about how every story as a writer is a choose your own adventure novel. And maybe you picked the path that sent you to page 214, where unfortunately you just got picked up by hawks and now you're dead. So back up and pick a different path. And so I always say, just back up. Like you're on a map that you're drawing the map as you go, but I personally cannot start a story until I have those key elements in place, and I need to know that world and feel like I live in it already. Otherwise, I'm gonna never finish.
Yeah, I have something to say. So just in terms of your manuscript and whatever it is that you're working on and wherever you're stuck, like I always think of the creative process is an organic one. So there are ebb days and there are flow days. And so we all know what to do with the flow days, right? Like we just write, like those are the great days. And then there are these ebb days where maybe something's not working, or you feel stuck in the manuscript, or you don't know what the next piece is. And like that's okay to be there, right? And it's what you do with those days, I think. That's often, there can be constructive ebb days, and there can be days that, take you further away from your manuscript. So what you can do with an ebb day, or what you can do with an ebb moment is, you can throw the ball for your dog, you can put in a load of laundry, you can bake a cake, anything where your mind kind of goes blank and does something else. And that's often where the next piece of the story comes. You can't go on social media. You can't Facebook stalk your ex. You can't watch funny cat videos, or even unfunny ones. You have to, stay connected to your story. And then if you have a number of these ebb days and there's just a piece that you feel like is not working, then I think you have to do a little bit of detective work. you have to figure out what's not working. Is it the book that's not working? Is it the place? Is it, am I not in touch with this character? And then how do you get back in touch with that person or that place or that story or that idea? So it take, like the writing of a book is, a lot of it, but also the being with the story and being with the characters and letting that stuff evolve. Like a lot of times it takes a couple of days to find your next place, and you have to be patient with that. And if you have faith that that is going to come to you, then that's great. And if not, then you have to do some detective work into why the book is not working for you in this given moment.
I have two quotes for you. I have two things that I think about every day. And one is a quote from David Mamet, which is, if you have a problem in the third act, it's probably from the first act. So just rewind, and find the place in the book that it started not working. And ask yourself why. There, you'll find it. It's just being a detective in your own brain and in your own novel. And the other quote is from Thomas Edison, who supposedly said, when you think you have exhausted all of the possibilities, remember this, you haven't. So it's not that you can't solve the problem, it's just that you haven't found the solution yet.
So I think that's a great place to end it. I want to give a huge thanks to all of our wonderful authors. It's such a great panel. I'm Lee Matthew Goldberg.